December 1284. Conwy Castle, North Wales. A servant opens a narrow wooden door beside the royal chamber. Behind it is a stone seat, a dark opening, and a shaft disappearing through the wall. This was not an afterthought. It was part of the castle's engineering. A medieval fortress had to survive attack, but it also had to survive the people living inside it. Soldiers, servants, guards, craftsmen, officials, and members of the royal household all produced waste every day. A castle could store food. It could collect water. It could protect hundreds of people behind thick walls. But none of that answered one basic question. Where did everything go? The medieval castle toilet is often called a garderobe. From inside the chamber, it could appear simple. A wooden or stone seat covered an opening. The user sat above it. Waste fell away. But beneath the seat was a hidden structure. The chute. Some chutes ran vertically through the thickness of a wall. Others projected outward from a tower or residential chamber. Their destination depended on the castle, the surrounding terrain, and the way the building had been planned. Waste might fall into a pit beneath the structure. It might enter a chamber that could be emptied from outside. At some castles, it dropped beyond the outer wall toward a ditch, slope, or riverbank. The toilet was not one object. It was a route through the building. That route began in a private chamber. It passed through several feet of masonry. It ended somewhere servants could reach, gravity could move waste away, or the surrounding landscape could keep it outside the occupied rooms. Gravity did most of the work. That sounds simple. But using gravity inside a fortress required decisions before the wall was complete. A mason had to preserve an opening through the stone. The shaft had to descend without crossing a passage, stairway, fireplace, or important chamber. Its lower end needed somewhere to discharge. The seat required support. The chamber needed a doorway, and the entire system had to fit inside a wall that also served as defense. Once the masonry closed around the shaft, changing it became difficult, so the toilet had to exist in the design before anyone used it. At Conwy Castle, important residential rooms included access to private latrines. These were not detached huts in the courtyard. They were built beside chambers, used by members of the royal household. Privacy was part of the architecture. A user could leave a bedroom, pass through a small doorway, and enter a narrow recess inside or beside the wall. The space might be cramped. Cold air could move upward through the opening. The chamber was not comfortable by modern standards, but it was close. For an elite medieval household, that mattered. At Dover Castle, Henry II's great tower contained several garderobes. Waste descended through chutes toward pits or lower spaces that could be approached away from the main rooms. This separation was important. The household did not make the waste disappear. It moved the problem downward and placed it in someone else's hands. Below the chambers, the system still required labor. At Old Sarum, deep cesspits beneath the castle reached roughly 5 meters. They collected waste from facilities above. Emptying them was not automatic. Workers had to remove the accumulated material. The private chamber above depended on an unpleasant job below. The system was therefore both architectural and social. Stone shafts separated users from waste. Servants separated the household from maintenance. Exterior access separated cleaning from the rooms where people ate, slept, and worked. When every part functioned, the toilet remained almost invisible. When one part failed, the entire castle noticed. A chute could become blocked. A pit could fill. Drainage could slow. Material could accumulate against the outer wall. Smell could travel back toward occupied chambers. Gravity could move waste downward. It could not guarantee that the route remained clear. The shaft was narrow. The material was irregular. People could throw objects into the opening that the system was never designed to carry. And there was no pressurized sewer beneath the castle waiting to remove it. Maintenance was the hidden mechanism. This is why the bottom of the system mattered as much as the seat. A cesspit needed enough capacity. A cleaning chamber needed access. An exterior discharge point had to remain clear. If waste collected close to the wall, servants and defenders might still have to work around it. Rain could wash some material away. A steep slope might move it farther from the building. A nearby river could carry it downstream, but castles were not standardized machines. A fortress on a cliff faced different conditions from one built on flat ground. A castle beside a river had options unavailable to a keep surrounded by a dry courtyard. A royal residence needed more facilities than a small military outpost. The placement of toilets reveals how a castle was intended to function. A single garderobe might serve one private room. Several could be stacked through different floors. Some castles concentrated them in a single tower. Others distributed them through residential ranges and defensive structures. Goodrich Castle eventually received a large garderobe tower. It was not decorative, it organized waste. Separate entrances led toward toilet chambers. Multiple seats could serve larger groups. Instead of forcing every shaft into unrelated sections of the castle, the tower concentrated the system in one structure. That tells us something important about medieval fortresses. They were not only weapons made from stone, they were vertical communities. People cooked in kitchens. They slept in chambers. They guarded gates. They stored grain, repaired weapons, carried water, and moved through narrow corridors. Every one of those activities created logistical problems. The toilet reveals the problem castles tried hardest to hide. Water played a role, but not in the modern sense. Most garderobes were not flushing toilets. There was no sealed pipe, pressurized supply, or handle sending clean water through the system. Instead, liquids, gravity, rainfall, manual cleaning, and the shape of the chute helped material move downward. Where water was scarce, waste remained until someone removed it. Where water was abundant, it created another problem. Moisture passing through masonry could weaken mortar, spread damp, and carry contamination toward rooms or storage spaces. This made location critical. Builders wanted the toilet close enough to a chamber for convenience, but far enough from kitchens, wells, and stored food to limit danger. They also had to protect the wall. A vertical shaft interrupted defensive masonry. A projecting latrine needed timber or stone support. An opening near the base could not weaken a vulnerable gateway or create an easy point of access. Comfort had to fit inside defense. The seat was only the visible end of that compromise. A wooden board might span the chamber. A circular opening passed through it. Beneath that, stonework directed waste into the shaft. The room could be so small that a modern visitor might walk past it without noticing. A recess, a narrow doorway, a hole in the wall. But follow that opening downward and the entire castle changes. The chamber connects to a shaft. The shaft connects to a pit. The pit connects to a worker. The worker connects to an exterior route. And that route connects to the surrounding landscape. What looked like a private moment depended on an entire chain. The same pattern appears throughout medieval engineering. A wall depended on a quarry. A crane depended on rope makers. A kitchen depended on fuel and water. A garderobe depended on gravity, masonry, access, and labor. Nothing worked alone. That is why surviving latrines are valuable evidence. The wooden seats are usually gone. Doors have disappeared. Pits have been filled. Lower openings may have been altered, but the stone route can remain. A small chamber beside a royal room, a vertical channel inside a tower, a dark opening high above the ground. Modern visitors may ignore these features. They appear insignificant beside battlements, gates, and great halls. But they reveal the castle as a living machine. One built not only to resist armies, but to manage bodies. Centuries later, the chambers are empty. The servants are gone. The shafts remain inside the walls, and at the bottom, some of them still lead into darkness. The hidden engineering of a medieval castle toilet reveals something larger than sanitation. Comfort rarely disappears, it moves. A private chamber high in a tower could feel clean and convenient because the waste had been redirected into a shaft, a pit, an exterior route, and eventually into someone else's work. The person using the seat saw only the finished surface. Beneath it was masonry, drainage, access, maintenance, and labor. That pattern is not limited to castles. Systems often look simple from the point where we use them. Water arrives from a tap, waste leaves through a pipe, food appears in a market. A building feels permanent. The difficult parts remain out of sight because other people, materials, and routines keep them there. Medieval builders understood this in practical terms. A toilet could not be added carelessly after the wall was complete. Its path had to be planned. Its lower end had to remain accessible. Its failures had to be managed. The lesson is not that the past was primitive or ingenious. It is that every form of convenience rests on a hidden chain. The chamber was private. The work beneath it was not.